Mel Stride, Treasury Minister, and Tony Lloyd, Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary. We're going to talk about this story in The Guardian. Penny Mordaunt, new Defence Secretary, to give veterans amnesty for battle crimes. Mel Stride, what's the government proposing?
Well, we're going to consult, this is an announcement that the Secretary of State has just made, on whether we should be exempting, under certain circumstances, those who would otherwise be potentially prosecuted for activities on the battlefield, where those activities occurred more than 10 years ago. So I think what this is dealing with is historic cases where, of course, there could be exceptional circumstances beyond 10 years ago. There could be new information that comes to light, which makes it appropriate to still proceed with prosecution. But in the absence of those two elements, to draw a line at that particular point for UK forces.
Do you support this idea in principle, Tony Lloyd?
Well, we need to be very cautious. We've not seen the thing in print. I welcome the announcement that says, for example, that Northern Ireland has been excluded, and that's very important, particularly when there are talks taking place between the different parties, because that would have been, I think, a potential deal breaker. But, of course, Britain does have international obligations to the International Criminal Court, to the European Convention, which do matter because human rights matter. Now, Mel makes the point, I think Penny Mordaunt, the Defence Secretary, made the point that part of this will be in certain circumstances, trials can go ahead. Let's be clear, when people have committed, people who swear an oath to the Queen to uphold her laws, when in the most extreme circumstances they break that oath, then actually they've broken our laws. I don't think the idea of an amnesty is appealing in those extreme circumstances.
Right, and you say that you are relieved that Northern Ireland doesn't seem to have been included in this amnesty. That's not actually what the Defence Secretary is hoping for, but Penny Mordaunt would like it to be included.
Well, I do think it should cover Northern Ireland. I think the problem is that we have failed to make progress on the whole lawfare issue because we have been held up waiting for other things to happen. I made two announcements overnight. One is about trying to address the wider problem, including an assumption that that prosecutions will not be brought, about developing what derogating from the European Convention on Human Rights means, and other things as well, which I think will close down litigation, vexatious litigation.
Do you think Northern Ireland should be part of this as well?
I'm very concerned when I heard the story this morning that Northern Ireland wasn't going to be part of it, because that seemed to me to be sending a very worrying message that it's OK for our troops to commit battle crimes overseas, but not when it comes to our own people. That sent a chill down my spine. I think it has to be included. I don't think there can be any exemptions. We've already had the problem, haven't we, with the IRA being given amnesty and protection from prosecution, but not British troops. That anomaly has got to be sorted.
Kirsty?
I think it's really important to take into consideration all of the challenging circumstances around any legal proceedings, around any alleged illegal act. But, I mean, the bottom line in this is that nobody should be above the law,
yes.
And whether they're wearing uniform or not. But we need to, in any proceedings, it needs to, as I say, those challenging circumstances need to be taken absolutely into account.
Mel?
Well, there is a process in play in Northern Ireland, and it's a very unique situation in Northern Ireland, quite different actually from what we're discussing here in the context of the UK. And those differences include, firstly, that this is largely a devolved matter. There is a peace process that has been going on for many years.
But obviously Stormont hasn't been sitting, has it?
Correct, and that makes it more problematic, but it doesn't mean there is no thing. But the second thing I would say is you're looking here in the context of Northern Ireland at holding civil powers rather than being in a battlefield situation as UK troops overseas, for example. So there are critical differences here, which I think matter, and that's why this is being handled in a different manner.
Do you accept that?
No, I don't. I mean, first of all, Mel, look, this isn't a devolved matter. This is a matter of the actions of agents, the United Kingdom, the Crown, if you like. Actually, it's interesting, the expression was used before, battlefield crimes. Where we're talking about crimes, let's be serious. These are things that, these are the most serious crimes. We're not talking about parking on double yellow lines or shoplifting. We're talking about where deaths have occurred and where the allegation is deaths have occurred wantonly. Now, in those circumstances, I think it is very difficult to justify how it is that British troops, who, as I say, swear an oath to uphold our laws, are exempt from those laws.
What do you say, though, to people like Johnny Mercer, Conservative MP, member of the Armed Forces, former member of the Armed Forces, the macabre spectacle of elderly veterans being dragged back to Northern Ireland to face those who seek to refight that conflict through other means without any protection from a government who sent them almost 50 years ago is too much?
Well, I would draw attention to, for example, the recent Hillsborough trials. Many years after the Hillsborough disaster, we rightly saw it fit to take action against elderly former serving police officers, etc. Now, nobody has said to me that they shouldn't be brought before the courts. Now, within this context, look, let's be very clear about this. We're not talking about the overwhelming majority of soldiers who went there, served Queen and country under the law, sought to serve them under the law. We're talking about that very, very tiny minority who actually betrayed the trust, not simply of the nation, but even of their own comrades. Now, that matters because we can't say there is an exemption for crimes ultimately like murder.
Right. Do you accept that, Mel Stride? And what about what Johnny Mercer has said? No protection from a government for these veterans who fought during the Troubles?
Well, as I say, you have a particular context when you look at Northern Ireland on the back of the peace process, the Good Friday Agreement of 1998, the consultation between the parties at the moment trying to get Stormont back up and running. And I think that is an entirely different environment in which to consider the issue of, for shorthand purposes, amnesties, and where that should apply, who it applies to. The conflict resulted tragically in 3,500 deaths. Many of those were caused by paramilitaries on both sides of the divide in Northern Ireland. So it's a highly complex situation, and I don't think one size fits all with a UK-wide approach, as we're currently consulting on a UK-wide basis, would be an appropriate way to go in that.
I mean, what was your going through your mind, your thoughts when you heard Karen Bradley, the Northern Ireland Secretary, saying that the killings at the hands of the security forces during the Troubles were not crimes?
Well, I think she subsequently has regretted saying that, and it is the case that each one of the incidents that occur within Northern Ireland, on whichever side they occur, have to be seen through the same prism in terms of seeing that justice is delivered. So I think it's important that as a civilised society we take a measured and universal view as to these particular incidents that have occurred, and leave the judiciary to draw the conclusions appropriately.
Joe, I must make one point, though, just for the sake of clarification. There is no blanket amnesty for paramilitaries, whether that be the UVF, the UDA or the IRA. The PSNI, the Police Service of Northern Ireland, is presently investigating allegations against each of those organisations, and it's really important the public does understand this. This isn't about some sense of our troops being treated unfairly. Our troops ought to be treated fairly. It's only in the most extreme cases of behaviour that goes out with the law that we ought to see prosecution taking place.